Hi, I'm Nicholas Lodge and I'd like to introduce you to my Ultimate Filler Flowers mold, part of my Flower Pro line. This very innovative mold can be used for many different types of flowers. Actually, over 20 different flowers and buds and blossoms can be created from this one single mold. In this first segment, I'm going to show you how to use the hydrangea. Hydrangea is a very popular 4-petal flower. We use a lot for weddings. It comes in many shades of white, pinks, purples, blues, and greens. And the hydrangea is actually going to be made using this 4-petaled vena here, which we'll come on to in a short while. First, I'm going to show you how to make the buds. So when we are making the hydrangea, I'm going to use 30 gauge wire. So 30 gauge wire is the thinnest wire I typically use. You can buy 33 and 35 gauge wire, but generally this is, as I said, the thinnest gauge I use. Remember, the higher the number on the wire, the thinner the wire, and wire goes from 18 through to 30 in even numbers. I'm going to use some white floral tape. Alright, so white floral tape here. This is a little cutter that will cut your tape into quarters. Alright, so you're just going to just rotate this, and there are several different versions of this on the market, and this will actually just cut through your roll of tape. Alternatively, if you don't have one of these, you just take a pair of scissors. And when you're using floral tape, as I've shown in some of my other videos, make sure when you finish with this, you just keep this into a zip top type of bag, because it will dry out. It's basically paper and glue. Now, hydrangeas, the stem of the hydrangea, so and the actual part here underneath the flower, is actually usually the same color tone as the flower. So for example, if this was a blue hydrangea, this will actually be dusted like a pale blue color. If this was a pink hydrangea, this is a very pale green, which is one of the color varieties I'm going to show you. But so I'm using white here, and then when we dust the pale apple green, we'll actually dust that down here. That is why we're using white tape, not using green. I'm going to take the floral tape and just stretch it slightly. And I'm going to take the floral tape at the end of the wire, and generally I just go around with the tape just once to get started. And I'm now going to cover this, and so you're just going to just stretch and pull the tape as you tape down. Alright, so you're just going to see how I'm keeping tension. For when we do things like knitting and crocheting, you're using tension on your wool or your yarn. It's a very similar technique, okay? So you just would continue down to your wire. So as you come down the wire, you come down towards the bottom here, just to show you finishing off. And you're going to cut this wire into 4 sections. So that means, like, let's say for example you were making 12 hydrangea flowers. That means you'll need to cover 3 independent wires. Now, floral wires are 14 inches long. So we're going to cut this first of all into 7 inches. So this is going to cut it into, but if you don't have to, it doesn't have to be exact. So I've cut these into 7-inch lengths, and then I'm just going to cut these 2 wires into half again. Okay, so this will give me my wires. Now, little tips I'm going to share with you. When you're doing flowers like, for example, hydrangeas or dogwoods, or flowers like, or lily of the valley, any flowers that are on skinny wires, because these wires are very thin, if you try and push this into a cake dummy or a regular styrofoam block, it's very difficult because the wire will bend. So what I typically use is like these green straws are cake pop straws. So you can just cut these in half and put those into a block of styrofoam or into a cake dummy. And it means then you have like a little holder. So you can see how when you put your flowers into there, it means that you can put them in and out very easily. So I use these in my classes when I'm doing, for example, flowers on 30 gauge wire, like, as I said, baby's breath, lily of the valley, any of those smaller flowers. Something else I use in my classes is a magnet. So you can just glue a magnet onto there. So you see, then you put your wires onto there. So when you're using either covered wires or uncovered wires, it means that the wires aren't going to fly off the table. You're not going to lose them. You have them there until you're ready to use them, and they will stay on the magnet. So those are little tips that are good for flowers like hydrangeas. Now, when we make the hydrangea centers, the flower centers, we're going to take the wire. This is, as I said, is the 30 gauge covered wire, and we're going to use a pair of tweezers here. These are just fine, pointed tweezers, okay? We want to use tweezers here, not pliers, because the width of a plier, even a very fine plier, is going to be a little bit too wide. Now usually you can take 2 or 3 wires at a time, and what we're going to do here is going to come in probably about 1.5 centimeters, about ½ an inch into the end of the, so you can see the wire is just visible at the edge of the tweezer here. And I'm going to fold this over and then just squash this with my finger. So I'm almost making a sort of a very, very tiny hook on here. Okay, so you're almost making the hook as small as you can make it on the end of the wire. Okay. Now, when we make the hydrangea, we're going to be using the size guide. All right, so this is a way I obviously standardize my using the molds. And with the Flower Pro line, we use obviously the size guide for measuring. So this is a really, really pale green, and it's a lovely color for the base of the hydrangea. Because when I finish off the hydrangeas, obviously they're going to start off in this color, and then I'm going to sort of bring in some darker colors, a little bit of chocolate brown onto them as well at the end. So this is a nice color to start off with. A lot of times students ask me, when you're making flowers, could you make all of your flowers white and then dust them? You could, but it's difficult to achieve some of the darker colors, but definitely on pastel colors. Generally, if I was making very, very pale pink hydrangeas, very, very pale blue hydrangeas, I would usually start off with white paste. If I was making like a darker blue or a darker pink, I'd start off with pale pink, pale blue. So we're going to use the size guide. So when we measure on the size guide, we're going to take your little ball of paste here, and we're going to put this onto the number 2. So we want approximately about 1/3 below the hole and about 2/3 above the top. All right. So this will be our sort of little gauge. So if you were making, let's say, like 12 hydrangeas, you're just going to use that as your guide. Okay. So what we're going to do here is going to just take your paste. I'm just going to condition the paste just a little bit. So I'm just going to literally just touch my finger. This is some white vegetable fat or shortening, and just going to touch that. You can also use coconut oil as well. Basically something vegetable, not animal. So just going to work a little bit of paste into here. And then I'm going to use, this is just a little cornstarch pouch. So I'm just going to just roll my little ball on my cornstarch pouch. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to drop this into the smallest of the 3 cavities on the mold, which is going to be, this is the small, this is the medium, this is the large. You can see progressively they get bigger. So I'm going to pop that into that cavity. Using my little companion tool, this is included with the filler flowers. So with the purchase of the filler flowers, you get this amazing little stick. We call it the companion stick, and it will become your companion, your friend. It's a wonderful little tool, invaluable in making smaller flowers, and especially with this particular mold. So we're going to use the ball tool here, and I'm just going to press this in gently. I don't want to sort of like make a big hollow in it, but I'm just going to press it in gently using the ball tool end. We're then going to take your little hooked wire. I'm going to use some egg white. All right, so I'm using egg white here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use a brush. Just going to take a paintbrush here, and I'm just going to put just a little bit of egg white just onto the hook, not too much. So now we're going to take this hooked wire, and this hooked wire is going to go into the paste. So you sort of push it into the mold like this. Okay. So now you're going to lift the mold up, and we're just going to flex it. So what we're going to do here, we're going to just flex it one way, and then we're going to flex it the other way. So you see what it's doing, it's going to push the paste around, and you see they just pop out like magic. All right, so it just pops out like magic. Now this is obviously the little tiny tiny center. It's like a 4-part center, and then just using a little cornstarch or corn flour on your fingers, I'm just going to taper it down. Okay, so you're just actually tapering this down, and that will be how you would make the center of the hydrangea flower. So very, very easy to make. And then you would take, that would be my number 3. So again, each time I work the paste, I just literally touch my finger, and what I refer to as condition the paste. All right, this is very important to give your paste life. And again, we're just going to and you can also just literally just have your little cornstarch pouch and just rub your paste onto there like that. You're going to then just drop this again into the mold. This is going to go into the medium mold. Again, just going to press this in gently. And now when you move on to the buds, you'll need the hook to be just a little bit bigger, all right? Because especially the number 4 bud, it's a little larger. So I'm going to show you here. So all you're going to do here, you're actually just going to come a little bit further down. Remember, we were about 1.5 centimeters, about ½ an inch down the tweezers. I'm just going to come down a little bit further. So I'm about 2 centimeters, about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to make the hooks just a little bit bigger so these will just be slightly larger for the buds, okay? Because if you make the hook too small, there's going to be nothing to grab hold of the paste. Again, we'll take your egg white brush. I'm going to put just a little bit of egg white just onto your hook, like this. And then this is going to go into the mold, all right? So you're going to push this into the mold here, like so. And again, you're going to just take your, now you're going to take your mold, and you're going to go 1 way, 2, 3. Usually when I do the buds, I do 4. And then when you take this out of the mold, you see how you're going to get this perfect little 4-part bud. You can see, of course, on the bigger buds, it's a little bit easier to see that detail. And then again, you're just going to use just a little bit of corn flour, cornstarch on your fingers. Just going to mold that slightly. Okay? And when you make the large bud will be done in exactly the same way. That is done with a number 4 size ball of paste, and that goes into the large cavity. Okay? So you have the small, you have the medium, you have the large. So now we're going to move on to the actual hydrangea flower. So once the flower centers have dried between 90 minutes and 2 hours or longer, we're going to move on to now actually make the hydrangea. So for this, we're going to use the 4-petaled part of the Ultimate Filler Flower mold. And this is what we're going to use for the hydrangea. And so we're going to start off by measuring off. So just like we did for the buds, this time we're going to use a number 7 small. All right, so that wants to be a number 7 size ball that just goes through the hole. Okay, so that would be classed as a number 7 small. Again, in the pale green or blue or whatever color you want to make your hydrangea. Again, we're just going to take a little bit of vegetable fat or shortening, and we're going to just condition this. So I'm going to take my number 7 small, and I'm going to make that into a sausage, basically the width of the blossom shape, all right? This is just a way I came up with of an easy way to make the flower. And then we're going to cut this. You can cut this with your little knife. You can cut it with a scraper, a pair of scissors. You're going to just cut that in half. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to mold the end of this so they become like 2 little sausages, okay? So they're going to just become like 2 little sausages like that. And then we're going to cross the sausages like this. So we're just going to cross them. It's a bit like a jack. So you're just going to just press this here. So you create this cross shape, you see? What it just means that you have consistent amount of paste going into each of the petals. And I just found this is overall a little quicker. Dust a little bit of corn flour, cornstarch onto your paste. And then you're just going to press this into the mold. Initially, you can just press this in with your finger. So as you can see here, it comes about 2/3 of the way down. So now we're going to take the cosmetic sponge. And with my cosmetic sponge, we're going to then bring the paste out to the edge. Now, in more of a traditional Katie Sue technique, we often just fill the molds level, but this means that in case of sometimes flowers, it's going to be a little bit thick on the edge, and that's why you see how using this technique, starting off with that cross shape, really does help a lot. So you see how I'm just really thinning the edges. You don't really have to worry too much about the center part of the mold. Making sure you stay within the perimeter of the mold. You're just going to just flex your mold. And as I said, your flower will come out of here. Okay, so this is going to give you a little beautiful hydrangea. I'm going to use my little flower pad here. So I'm going to use the back of this. And we're going to soften this just a little bit. I'm going to use a balling tool. You can even do this with the, obviously, companion tool as well. So you can just soften slightly here. But usually a little bit bigger tool is beneficial here. So it's going to just soften around your edge. So, and that's going to just give you that little bit of ruffle on the edge of this. And then we're going to turn this over. Now, hydrangeas can be used in many different ways. For example, if you wanted to use these hydrangeas on, say, cupcakes, on cookies, on the side of a cake, on trailing down a cake, you could do these totally unwired. So all you would do there is you just would take crepe foam and you just would put the hydrangea into a crepe foam former like this. Okay, and then you let them dry, you take them off the foam, you then would dust them. So this has actually, like you can see, the little 4-petal center in here. So that's all you need to do for quick hydrangeas. So those are perfect for cupcakes and lots of applications. If you're going to wire the hydrangeas, we're going to use here cosmetic sponge with a hole in it. And so I'm actually going to take my little companion tool, the round ball end of the companion tool, and I'm actually going to hollow into that little center. So you can see what I've actually done is the center now disappears, and that is going to extend the back to accommodate the center. We're then going to take your dry, so these are dry ones, all right? So remember, this has to dry for, 90 minutes, 2 hours. Going to take a little bit of egg white, and it's going to just brush a little bit of egg white just around the very, very base of the center, about halfway up. And then you're going to take this, press this through, and you're going to go through the cosmetic sponge with the hole, the round sponge with the hole, and you're going to pull this into the middle like this, all right? So this gives you your hydrangea. And you see then you just take this, and you're just going to just shape that to shape, so you can have this, more closed, you can have it more open. And then usually you're going to hang this on a hanging rack, so you can just bring in, this is a larger hanging rack, but you can just use a little small hanging rack, basically something just to hang it upside down. And what this does, this is going to, the flour will just need to dry like that for literally about 5 minutes. So if you were making 20, 30 of these, once you've done 5 of them, they don't really take that long to dry. Then you're just going to take those, and then they would go into your straws like this, and this will be your hydrangeas ready for the next stage, which is going to be coloring. So once your flowers have dried for 3 or 4 hours or overnight, and obviously your buds, we don't have to do anything else to those are dry, we're now going to move on to the coloring. So I'm going to show you first of all the green, the pale green and chocolate variety. So this is just a light green, like a light apple green color. So this is going to be my base color. So generally when I'm dusting, I'm working on some paper towel or a napkin. So I'm just going to take some green dust. And this is going to be my base color. Now, when we dust the buds, these are pretty easy because you can actually just put those down onto the napkin here. And you see how what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to dust the stem the same color. So if this was a blue variety, like a periwinkle blue, this would be blue dust or pink dust. So we're actually going to, first part of that will be dusted. And that's why we start off with white floral tape onto this. Now when we do the flower, I'm going to do the same technique. So we're going to put this pale green color. So you can see this pale green color is going to go over the hydrangea. And green has become a very popular color for flowers, and the green hydrangea looks beautiful with like pink roses. This looks lovely with purple, with lavenders, so it's a very good color to use. But of course you could do also traditional white as well. So you're going to just dust a little bit of green over here. So that will be our base color. We're then going to move on to our secondary color, which is going to be like a prairie green color. This is sort of like a mid-green. Now remember, there are many brands of dusting powders, or paddle dust as sometimes they're called, and if you have a darker color, like you only had, say, a darker green, you can add corn flour or cornstarch to it to lighten it, as you'll see when I do the chocolate. So then I'm going to just take a little bit of my prairie, and just sort of like here and there, I'm going to just give like just a little hit of prairie, so you're just going to get this sort of soft green, just sort of like on the edges, but it's not like all the way over. And you're going to do this also on the back as well. So you're going to have just a little hit of prairie just here and there. We will also do the same with the buds. So a little bit of prairie green is going to go on to the buds also. Okay. Then we're going to move on to some chocolate. So this is chocolate, but I want it a little paler. So I'm going to take a little corn flour, cornstarch. Now, of course, depending on how many flowers you're doing, you could mix this up in a little container, but I'm just going to add just a little bit of chocolate here. And you see how then I'm going to get this just pale chocolate brown color. And generally I do this blending on, as I said, a napkin or paper towel. I'm just going to just add just a little touch of brown, just sort of here and there onto the flower. So this would just give just a little accent color. There's also a fairly new variety of hydrangea which actually has almost like a purple instead of the brown. So you could actually take green with purple. It's a beautiful color combination. So just a little bit of brown here. Again, also on your buds, just a little touch of brown. And then I'm going to finish this off with some white sparkle, because hydrangeas have a little bit of a sort of shimmer to them. So I'm going to use some sparkle dust. So this is sparkle dust. I'm just going to put just a little bit of that, because when we steam this, then you're going to get a little bit of an undertone of the shimmer here. So this is going to go onto the hydrangea. Now, as far as other color combinations go, this, for example, blue hydrangea here, all right, which is like a Nico blue color. But this color, I achieved this by using a like a periwinkle marine blue color, so you've got that sort of bluey color. And then I added some purple accent onto the edge of it. It's a little bit purple. And then I just added a little bit of green, the prairie green, into the middle. Because this hydrangea I've just shown you is green already, we don't need to put additional green in here. And you can see that's a very pretty color combination. But you could do pinks, you can do all different sort of colors. Now once you have got your hydrangea flower dusted, next step is going to be to actually just put these together. So we're going to use some half-width floral tape. So this is half-width green floral tape. So when we do the hydrangea, we basically are going to make like little florets. If you think about broccoli or cauliflower, you deconstruct that to cook it or make a salad with it, you make little florets. So you're going to take however many hydrangea flowers and buds you have, and you're going to do little groupings. Like this is a flower and a bud, this is 2 buds and a flower, this is 3 flowers. Here I'm going to show 2 buds and a flower. So you just put them together, and almost like where the 3 stems come, that's where you would actually tape them. Okay, so you're actually going to just start taping here, and just going to tape these together. Now when we use hydrangeas, of course, you could use these as a filler flower. If you were doing, say, like a spray of pink roses, you could do little groupings like this integrated in amongst the flowers. If you wanted to there, you could add like a 26 or 24 gauge wire to lengthen that. If you're going to do a classic head of hydrangeas, all right, what we do here is you generally start off, so like on the top of a wedding cake, you'd start off with, usually on a sort of a smaller cluster of maybe up to 15 flowers, a 20 gauge wire. If I was doing 30, 35 flowers, I would use an 18 gauge wire. So all you do is you start the wire here, and literally what you do is you just take your little cluster of flowers and you're going to start to add those. So you're thinking of it almost a little bit like a tree. All right, so this is like the trunk of the tree, and you see how the branches, so this is how you create this beautiful head, because what we're really ultimately creating here is like almost like a sort of an umbrella shape, you see? So you're actually going to just create this like an umbrella. So you're just going to create your, and you're just going to put your flowers together like this. And just going to but remember the wire just goes at the top here, and you're just going to add to this. And then you're going to tape down here. And then in some of my other videos talked about steaming, so then you're going to use like a closed steamer. You're going to use a tea kettle. You can obviously open these out. And then what you do is you just would gently steam this, all right, in a little bit of steam. Not too much, but what that would do, it would just give you that nice sort of waxy look to the flower. So that would be how you would to do that. And then of course you could cut this depending on the depth of your cake. Because sometimes like on a more contemporary style cake, you might use this in the top of the cake. These are actually hydrangea leaves, which is done with a serrated leaf cutter, done in my Flower Pro Vena, which I cover on that particular video. And these have been dusted with an apple green, and then I've used just straight chocolate here. So generally when I do hydrangeas, whatever color I have as my color on my flower, I use as an accent. So if this was a blue hydrangea, so if I was going to have blue hydrangeas here, what I would do is I'd use a little bit of blue dust. It's just a way I use in teaching, and I find it's a nice way to balance color. So if it was a pink hydrangea, you dust pink. And you just dust the color down here, and then these would be steamed and then spray lacquered. So now we're just going to tweak the petals here. Use your tweezers here so you see how the flowers will become coming out like this. All right, and then we're going to finish this off by just adding the foliage, the leaves, which is an optional step, but you know, like on top of the top of a wedding cake, this makes a very nice topper for a contemporary style cake. So you're just going to just add your 3 leaves. So be my second one, and then we'll have the third one. So these leaves will just come around the outside of here, and this will give me my hydrangea cluster here. And then we're going to just take down. So here you can see the hydrangea, so a beautiful flower made from a very easy to use mold, and as I said, you'll have a lot of fun creating those. This is a 4-petal flower, so this could be used for many other types of flowers as well. For example, like dogwood. This is obviously a very popular flower in North America. So dogwood is made in exactly the same way. It's just when I obviously finished off, before when I took it out of the mold, I just actually took my little needle tool and I just pulled in. So I just pull in between the petals like this and then soften it. And the dogwood center is made, which I'll be showing in one of my other videos, where I'll be showing how to make the baby's breath, the Gypsophilia, the mimosa, and pussy willow. So the center of that is actually just made in the small size mold for the baby's breath or the pussy willow or the mimosa. And so you just do that in exactly the same way as we did, obviously, the center, the little bud of the actual hydrangea. Let that dry and pull that into the center. So I hope you have lots of fun making hydrangeas or other 4-petal flowers using my Flower Pro Ultimate Filler Flower Mold. Until next time, this has been Nicholas Lodge, and I'll see you real soon.